Welcome to this bonus session. What's going to be offered on these courses is some workshops, and this particular workshop is geared towards you, the university, the college, the institution that is offering your work integrated learning opportunities. Now, you are either going to be offering this workshop by literally just playing this video and following the various steps that come up in this workshop. You might also be using this by looking at it and then creating your own version of that, somebody in person speaking to it. Whatever works for you, right? This is about giving you some resources which will enable you to be able to run a workshop for your staff in your institution who are the ones that drive work integrated learning, particularly in terms of strategy. So there's three things that you need to do before you run this workshop. Number one, you need to download this PowerPoint, add it to a Google Drive, create a link that you are then able to share with those who are taking part in the workshop. You will see the moment where that happens. I'll be explaining it in the video, and at that point in time you can share the link with those who are present, who have their laptops, their phones, and they are then able to participate using some online technology. And that makes it collaborative and all those kinds of things. Secondly, of course, you can download this video and play it just as it is. Just start at the point where I finish all these explanations. Just start at that point and push play. Thirdly, there are a whole lot of resources, that is being offered throughout this entire course that could be used, that could be inserted at any point here, again, to help your team think through their strategy. This particular section is downloadable, and if you have done the entire course, of course, you have got access to this as well. Right, so welcome to this workshop on work integrated learning strategy. You are in the room because you are part of designing, thinking, engaging with work integrated learning in your institution. So this means that you might be a work integrated learning director, a partnerships director, student engagement director for work integrated learning. You might be involved in placements, internships, work-based learning projects, work-based learning, any one of these kind of categories. Maybe you want to pause. If everybody in the room doesn't know each other that well, you might want to just pause for the moment and allow yourselves to introduce yourselves, your name, and what is the key function that you do, that you operate within work integrated learning in your institution. So why don't you do that right now? Great. Now that we know who's in the room and we know what each one contributes in the room, what we're going to be talking about in this workshop, and we want everybody to contribute. We want your ideas. We want to talk. We want to think about where it is that we want to go in terms of our work integrated learning strategy. What we're going to be thinking about here is how we scale up. How do we identify what we are doing and what we're doing well, and how do we scale that up? So either we want to scale it up in terms of volume and be able to do this more, and I'm going to be pointing you some directions for you to think about, or you want to scale it up in the sense that you want to make it even better. So you're not necessarily going up in volume, but you want to go up in quality. That's what we're going to be thinking about in terms of scaling up. And all of that is being captured in the idea of managing the growth of what it is we are offering. And we want to think very carefully about that word growth. Growth does not always necessarily mean volume, but it could mean growth in terms of quality and enhancement. Right? So let's get started. I'm going to be relying on two business theories. If you haven't heard about these, don't worry. I will explain them as I go through these. But we're going to be using two different business theories. The first one is by a guy called Michael Porter. And he came up with what's called generic strategies or competitive advantage. And what he really thinks about here, or what he offers us to think about, is differentiation and or cost. And I'll explain that a little bit later. His suggestion is that when you don't focus on either one or the other, you are what he calls stuck in the middle, which means you probably hit a little bit of both, but you don't do them effectively. And we're going to think about that very clearly, about are we very clear about where it is we want to go, and what is that position we want to end up in. So what's an important element for this workshop is defining point A, where are we now, and then later on defining point B, where is it that we want to be. I'm also going to be using what's called a stakeholder analysis. So this is everybody who's involved, but particularly when we come to the stakeholder analysis, I also want to use this as an opportunity to identify who is not being represented, the unspoken voice. I think business models sometimes is so focused on the bottom line, profit, those kinds of things, that we forget about the sustainability, the ethics of what it is we are doing. And so I want to use the stakeholder analysis as a way of, as well, identifying the unspoken voice, the unrepresented voice. And I'll use that theory to get us thinking about all those things within the context of work integrated learning. And then I'm going to finish this workshop by just throwing some ideas around emerging technologies and trends. If we're going to be defining where we want to be in terms of point B, we need to think about some of the emerging technologies and trends that are coming, so that we are not having to, in a sense, re-evaluate where we want to be in a year's time, that we can try and project using various trajectories in terms of where we'd like to be based on where we think the labor market is going and technology and so on. Right, so let's get stuck in. What I'd like you to do is on a piece of paper in front of you, or if you're using your laptops, I'd like you to, from your perspective, I'd like you to write down where are you now as an institution. Now, the reason why I'm getting you to do this individually, and there's method in my madness, is because later on we will see just to what degree is everybody on the same page in terms of your experience of what your institution and from your particular role and perspective, how that is involved in. Now, I'm listing 6 particular areas that I think is worthwhile thinking through. You might come up with others. Please add them. Don't feel that you are restricted or you're limited only to these 6. These 6, I think, are quite key, and I'm going to kind of talk you through each one. But if there's any others that you want to add, please do so. So let's start with the first one on the top left-hand corner, as you can see the screen. Across how many courses or disciplines is your work integrated learning provision? Do you know that? I work across work integrated learning in a number of institutions. I've also been involved in curriculum development. And at one particular university, I was aware that the take-up for placements between year 2 and 3 at university level, between years 2 and 3, so between level 5 and 6 in UK understanding, the take-up is around 20%. Now, this is across business. This is not across any of the other disciplines within the university, who will also have work integrated learning provision. This is just within the business school. Now, in the business school, there were at least, I would say, about 3 or 4 pathways that students could choose on: a generic business management, marketing, a business management with e-commerce, in other words, all the digital things, and then, of course, accounting and finance. If a 20% take-up, is that acceptable? Is that what you would like? What are the key courses that is taking advantage of this? Who's driving that? Is it the students who are applying within those courses, or is it the tutors that are driving it? The key question here is, and we'll come up to uptake in a minute, you'll see that that's below on the bottom left-hand corner. What I first want you to consider is your work integrated learning may be offered, right, across all the courses or disciplines that you have in your institution. I'm not really asking that question because you can just kind of, the answer could be all of them. I don't want to kind of do the uptake because I'm going to have a different angle on that, but I want you to think about across how many courses or discipline is it actively being implemented? Maybe that's a better way of saying it. Do you know that? So why don't you scribble down some of your ideas in terms of what those courses or disciplines are. Now, obviously, this is a workshop. We want to talk. I'm trying to be a catalyst in terms of your discussions. So I'm not looking here for the right answer. I'm getting you to think. So across how many courses or disciplines? I'm not looking for a number, 6, 7, 8. Write those down. What are the courses and disciplines where the uptake of what it is you are offering is happening? Now, this institution that I mentioned, where there's only a 20% uptake of placements, they run degree apprenticeships. Now, of course, a degree apprenticeship, the uptake is, 100% because they are a degree apprenticeship. They are already employed 80% of the time, 20% off campus, off work, which is where they're on campus studying. Do these programs compete with each other? To what degree are you as an institution offering work integrated learning opportunities? How are you engaged with the degree apprenticeships? Because you're not having to organize placements, they're already in work, but that doesn't mean you need to be excluded from the conversation. So think about that in terms of where are you now in terms of the active engagement of work integrated learning opportunities across courses and disciplines. Try and list those. If you'd like to pause the video to give people an opportunity to write, please do that. I'm just going to keep running through. And we're going to be running through the top line first. Right, top line up in the middle is our next category for you to list and to think about. How many industry partnerships do you have? How many industry partnerships do you have? And again, I'm not necessarily looking here for you to write down a number. Oh, we have 20, we have 18, we have 36. Can you identify who those partnerships are? Now, again, I'm not expecting everybody to know all the partnerships, but it will be interesting as you are part of the department, the organization that works with work integrated learning. Is everybody aware of who these partnerships are? The next thing I'd like you to think about in terms of your industry partnerships is there a particular dominant industry that seems to be on the uptake in terms of wanting to work with you as an institution? I know that the University of Waterloo, maybe this is you listening to the workshop right now, rah for you guys, the world's largest provider of placements, and you are very close to what you would be considered as the Canadian Silicon Valley. I would assume a lot of your partnerships is the digital economy, those kinds of emerging economies. Is that the case? Perhaps your university is near a particular group of businesses. I know one of the universities I work at, they are part of what's called the Golden Mile. So they have these massive big FTSE 100 companies literally surrounding the university. How many of those are partners? Clearly based just on your context. So how many industry partnerships do you have? How many of these partnerships, let's think about industry in general, are small, medium enterprises, are larger companies, so corporates, and or international companies who have multinational companies who have subsidiaries around the world. Because those, you'll see later, these open up all kinds of opportunities for us. So once you've listed all your industry partnerships, try and list which industry they're in and try and list the size of that partnership. Are they a startup, small, medium enterprise? Are they a large corporation? Are they a multinational company? Just what is your awareness of where you are now in terms of your industry partnerships? Right, in the top right-hand corner, let's think about what is the actual provision of work integrated learning. Are you offering projects? Are you offering placements? Are you offering internships? What are the, and whatever the terminology is that you use, cooperative education, work-based learning, degree apprenticeships, what is it that you are providing? And if you could put a number to that, how many of these do you provide, say, in a year? So how many projects are running? Now, clearly what you're looking at here is how this square in the top right hand corner, how that square links with the one in the top left hand corner. So what is it that you're providing? And again, try and see whether you can make links with what it is you're providing in terms of the square in the middle. So how many of these internships or placements are being offered in terms of small, medium enterprises, corporates, multinationals? See if there's a pattern that begins to emerge just from your perspective. You're going to get an opportunity to compare notes and discuss. Right, we're still thinking about where are we now. We've moved down to the bottom row. The next question is, what is the uptake? So you may have a provision that is within maybe all of your courses and disciplines. You may have a good number of partnerships on the books, whether you're offering paid placements or unpaid placements. And you may have, quite a wide variety of work integrated learning opportunities. But what is the demand? What is the actual uptake of these? I'd like you also to think about where you are offering these. Traditionally, most internships or placements is kind of at the end of 2 years study, just before the final third year, or at the end of the third year. I was involved in a program with the university in the UK where they did an advanced placement. So this was level 7, which is master's level, and they did a 20-week placement at the end of their degree, which enables them to graduate not just with a master's in business management, but a advanced placement master's in business management. In other words, they've had some experience. What is your uptake? So, is it 20%? Is it 30%? Is it 40%? Do you know any key differences in the uptake? Are men taking it more seriously than women? If you've got quite a wide range of students in terms of age, what is the age uptake? If you run degree apprenticeships, what is your average age on your degree apprenticeships? These kinds of things. What is your uptake? How much detail do you know about the demand and therefore the actual uptake of what it is you are offering? Scribble those down as well, and you might be able to look up at the top line answers in terms of courses, partnerships, and your provision to help you kind of think of the uptake on these. Now, of course, in terms of work integrated learning, this is all about getting students ready for the world of work, right? Job ready. And in a very competitive environment, job ready plus that little extra edge among graduates to even differentiate them being job ready plus. So what is your graduate employment statistics? I know that some universities, their graduates get a lot of jobs after they finish their degrees, but they may not necessarily be graduate jobs, which is kind of the whole point of university education, right? Is that upskilling to be able to get graduate level jobs, which comes with a higher salary and higher skill level and so on. What is your employability stats? Are you aware of what this is? As you are part of the institution or the department that works with work integrated learning, are you aware of these graduate employment statistics? And again, have you broken these down in terms of the various courses and disciplines? Are some courses, disciplines better in terms of graduate employability? Are certain industries taking on your graduates, or are they going into particular industries more so than others? And are, the broad provision, is it the placements? Is it the internships? Is it the projects that actually, as an outcome, produce more graduate employment? And then finally, you probably want on maybe page 3 now of notes. Finally, what are the most evident challenges for you as you work within work integrated learning in your department? Scribble those down. What for you are the most evident challenges? Right, you should have absolutely loads of notes on your pad or on your laptop. What I'd like you to do now is, in groups of 4 or 5, depending on how many people are in the room, share some of your ideas. When you share these ideas, number one, there are two purposes for sharing this in a broader sense. Number one, listen to the ideas of other people. Use those as a catalyst for your own thinking. Did they say something you didn't think of? Why don't you think of that? Is it true? Debate. Have a conversation. But number two, look for patterns that are beginning to emerge as you all individually come together as a department or as a faculty. What does this mean in terms of where you are now in terms of work integrated learning? So go and have that conversation, take as long as you need, and then the groups will share in a plenary for everybody the conclusions they've reached in terms of all of these 6 areas, combining them to answer the question, where are you now in terms of your work integrated learning provision? And if you want to have a bit of a play, maybe you can rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 as to how satisfied you are in terms of where are you now. Right, brilliant. Having had that discussion, let me talk you through Porter's competitive advantage. Now, what Porter says is that in terms of business and what you are offering as part of the institution is an element of what you are offering as a business. He says that there's 2 ways in which you can focus. Now, bearing in mind, often when Porter is talking about this competitive advantage, he's talking about a company selling a good or a service. Universities are complex. We are selling a service in the sense that we're selling different kinds of courses. But different kinds of courses can be pitched in different kinds of ways, even within one organization. So there is a broad target, right? And because there's 3 categories here that Porter is introducing to us. He's introducing to us cost, differentiation, and focus. So you've got 3 options here in terms of thinking about yourselves as an organization. I'm going to kind of unpack this theory, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity again, having discussed where you are now as an organization, for you then to have a discussion, where do you position yourself? Do you position yourself in terms of cost, differentiation, or focus? So let me talk you through this little diagram. Forgive me if you know this already. So the first one is what's called cost leadership. What's being argued here is that you kind of stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the quality is being impacted, and I'll give you an example of this in a minute. What you're trying to do here is you're trying to offer a broad range of provisions so that you have a volume of uptake. You have a volume of products and services that you're offering. A really good example here of a broad target is our budget airlines. In the UK, we have EasyJet and Ryanair. They're not trying to offer a service like British Airways or Virgin Atlantic or any one of these other big airlines. They're offering a very scaled back service. They'll get you from A to B, but very scaled back. And if you want all the luxuries, you have to pay extra for those. But it means that the ticket prices are extremely cheap. Now, the only way this can work for them financially is volume. Because they're not charging a lot. Therefore, they need the huge amount of volume in order to be able to make the profits they need to make. Stack them high, sell them cheap. Now, what does this look like in terms of work integrated learning? Because you're not selling these positions, are you? But what you are trying to do, and what you're thinking about, is do I want to offer everything that's available in terms of work integrated learning? And do I want to try and get as many students to participate in this as far possible? And therefore, do I want to try and see to what degree can I have an overall outcome in terms of employability statistics? What is it that you are offering in terms of volume? Right? And I'm not saying that it's a decline in quality. You can still offer quality, but at an affordable way. Now, what's important here is what's called the scales of economy. And I'll give you an example of that when I show my example in a few minutes' time. But a key element is here, unless there is demand, this won't work. So you have to have a clear indication that there is a demand for the amount of volume that you're trying to sell. The next one is what's called differentiation. Now, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to be different to the general market. Now, let's think about work integrated learning. If you're listening to this workshop within your institution is most likely a member of some kind of work integrated learning organization. In Australia, I know it's ASIN. In the UK, it's an organization called ACIT, and in Canada, it's called CEWL, the Canadian Educational Work Integrated Learning Network, I think it stands for. And of course, all of this could potentially be belonging to WACE, the World Organization for Cooperative Education. When you join these organizations, as I am in the UK, ACIT has a huge membership. In other words, there is a lot of institutions, if not most of them, if not all of them, are offering work integrated learning. So are you offering more of the same, or are you trying to offer something that makes you stand out in the market in terms of work integrated learning? That's differentiation. Now, you can be different, you can differentiate from your competition in a number of ways. It could be in terms of what you're offering, could be different in I don't know, maybe you're offering only virtual placements, maybe you're doing things internationally, maybe you're working with a very well-known company, maybe you're only working in a particular part of an industry, maybe you're keeping it small, but the value of what you are doing is very, very high. Some airlines, let's stick with the airlines as examples here. If your discounted airline, Ryanair and EasyJet in the UK, is an example of cost leadership, your differentiation would be places like Cathay Pacific. They are expensive, and you know they're expensive, but you are happy to pay that expensive price because you know you're getting what you're paying for in terms of the value, the luxury, etc., etc. Now, work integrated learning can pitch itself and position itself in the market in this particular way. You could be, working towards offering a boutique version of work integrated learning. We'll come back to this a little bit later. So that's cost, that's differentiation. Now, you might want to take either a cost or differentiation positioning, but you want to do this within a very focused target market. That's the focus element. So again, let me give you an example in the airline industry. If EasyJet, Ryanair in the UK is examples of your cost carriers, very cheap, stack them high, sell them cheap. A cost focus would be, chartered airlines, you are the cheapest of chartered airlines. So you may still be aiming for the cost element, but it doesn't necessarily mean the cost element is the cheapest out there. But you're the cheapest in terms of what exists within that focused market. So again, you might be focusing on a particular industry, and that's the only industry you're focusing in on, or you may be focusing in on one particular provision of work integrated learning, such as paid placements within top, FTSE 100 accountancy firms. That would be a very focused angle, but you would be the most accessible, the most affordable version of that, because you're still focusing on cost. Or your focus is on still being very different in the market, but you are adding almost an extreme version of value within that focused industry. So this would be, for example, a cruise ship, which is expensive already to start with, that offers 24/7 medical care on board. Now, you're going to be paying an arm and a leg for that service, but it's worth it because nothing else exists like this. And so the price can be extremely high, but what you're offering is a very focused, different provision. So where would you position yourself as an institution? Is that very clear in terms of where you're positioning yourself? Now, quite often this positioning, even within an individual department, needs to be aligned with where the organization positions itself. If the organization, for example, a university, is targeting what's called widening participation, so they are trying to draw the kind of students who would not normally go to university, who would not normally succeed at university. If that's the clientele that you're trying to reach, How are you aligning your work integrated learning provision with that overall strategy in the organization? And where are you positioning yourself in terms of advantage? Right, let me give you one example, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about this in your groups again. Don't forget there are 3 areas. Cost, being different, differentiating yourself within the market, and or focusing your cost or your difference. So let me give you an example. Let's take this Udemy course as an example. When I set it up, I could have gone for a huge price that you would need to pay, £100 to do the course, as an example. That would then work its way through, and because of such a high price, I might have 3 people a year who did the course, which obviously gives me my £300. Sorry, 2, 3, 4, £400. Or I could have sold it at £10 because I know there is demand. Students, staff, institutions, partnerships. And so obviously because I'm, selling it at £10, but there is demand, I could be selling a lot more at a cheaper price. That's my cost. The one at the bottom would be differentiating based on kind of value, which then has an implication in terms of cost. Now, if you add these 2 up, you will notice that the low cost, although I'm selling the units at such a low cost, because of the demand, because of the uptake, you end up with £610 at the end compared to the £400. So I would be able to make a bigger profit because the demand is out there. So again, the question is the uptake, right? What is the demand? Do students recognize the importance, and do they take advantage of these kinds of things? And what you're pitching here is not necessarily in terms of cost, because you're not selling something. Students don't have to pay for this. Often it comes part of the degree, and they have the opportunity to take up an internship or placement. But the uptake is really important here in terms of what it is you are offering. And I want you to think about that. Now, in both cases, this could be the exact same course, but it's just how I position myself in the industry. Now, scales of economy is about mass production, but I'm selling them in order to then be able to sell more because the demand is there. And that's an important element. Think about a bakery. I could be pushing out thousands of rolls, but if I'm not selling those bread rolls, they're going to go mold, and I'm losing money because of a wasted product. So there has to be demand. Scales of economy, being able to produce mass and bring down the unit cost of every single one of those bread rolls, only works because I'm selling the bread rolls. Now, if you want to increase your uptake, then somehow you need to increase the demand. Right, so here's some questions that I'd like you to think about and have a discussion within your groups. What are your capabilities? What makes your organization unique? What do you have? Look around the room at the moment. Look at who is sitting in the room. What do they bring to your overall work integrated learning strategy? That's your capabilities. When you offer work integrated learning to your students, what are the capabilities that your students are bringing to your program? The kinds of industry partnerships you have, what does that create in terms of your capability as a university, as an institution? And again, of course, are these aligned to the overall strategy within your institution? So let's go through these 3 categories: cost, focus, differentiation. Cost. Is it about the quantity of offerings that you are offering? This may be in terms of the types. You want to offer all of the work integrated learning types that are out there: internships, placements, practicums, etc., etc. Or is it about the partnership provision? You want to cover every single industry that's out there, from startups and small, medium enterprises right the way through to multinationals. And you want to offer not just national partnerships, but international partnerships, not just virtual, but not just in-time placements, internships, but virtual as well. You want to offer everything, right? So you're kind of spreading yourself as thin as possible to offer as many opportunities as there are. And therefore you want to increase the uptake. What's important for you is not just to have a 20% uptake, but to have an 80% uptake. That would be an example in some ways of cost. If you want to focus on cost or differentiation, these are some of the questions that you want to ask. Is it about something specific, such as a focused provision? So in this case, you may want to just focus on health workers. You just want to focus on education teachers. You just want to focus in on military or police. Is that focus, and again, is that focus about cost? So if you're focusing just on healthcare, do you want to provide as much as you possibly can and spread yourself right the way across? Or do you only want to offer a very boutique provision for the healthcare sector, which is not being offered anywhere else? And that makes you different. You're differentiating yourself. Or in terms of just differentiation overall, is it about the quality of what you're offering? In other words, less in number and uptake as well as provision, but what is offered is very, very unique or different, such as, I don't know, coaching by the CEO as part of the placement. And what therefore makes that very valued offer very unique and very different? What makes it kind of boutique? So, hopefully I've thrown enough out there to get you thinking, where do we position ourselves? Where does the organization position itself? And I'm working my way towards the question, where do you want to position yourself? So do pause the video at this point and have some discussion around this. Right, what are some of the implications and applications as a result of what it is we are discussing here? Well, what is the impact on graduate employment? There's no point in just doing something if the result is not what we're aiming to achieve. If you're aiming to increase your graduate employment, how is a shift in your strategy going to impact graduate employment? It might be about student engagement. And so what you're offering, what makes your services as a work integrated learning department or faculty important for the university overall is the fact that this increases student engagement on the courses. The students enjoy that course because they're able to engage with industry, and you are offering those opportunities. Perhaps it's the impact on partnership arrangements, that it's well-known companies, or it's not well-known companies, they're small, it's intimate, it's breaking the industry down into all these various components, and that's what you're offering. Maybe that's the impact. There's a change and shift in your partnership arrangements. Or maybe it's the way you work with your partners, rather than them just kind of babysitting a student, that the engagement with the students in the workplace is enhanced. What's the provision from your staff who are ensuring the connection with the placement and internship and the course itself? I've been doing some research around academic staff involved in work integrated learning programs, and in a lot of cases, if a student's been away on a placement, there's no real connection, links between the module beforehand. The student's not aware of a placement coming up, and that they could connect some of the theory, saying, so if you're going on a placement, what you want to be thinking about is, and helping them to implement that theory. Or a module that follows a placement or an internship, saying, so who went on a placement over the holidays, for example. Right, so as we go through this, and that, what I'd like you to do, the student who's been on the placement or internship, what was your experience in the workplace? Most of the staff that I have interviewed and worked with in terms of research, this link is just not there. Also, staff who's involved in, for example, degree apprenticeships, are not really aware of what is work integrated learning in terms of experiential learning, applied learning, Mode 2 knowledge. They're completely unaware of the theory that undergirds this. So that might be the impact, is actually getting your staff at a higher level in terms of that kind of engagement. You might be wanting to redesign your entire curriculum so that your offer is not just a placement between year 2 and 3, but the entire curriculum has a work integrated learning ethos throughout it. Or, as you talk about where you position yourself in the market, you might want to be thinking about your teaching and learning practices, which again is what I suggested in terms of staffing. Not only who teaches on them, but to what degree are they ready and prepared to understand experiential learning in these kinds of contexts. Or you might think of some other implications as you are having the discussions. So you've had a discussion about where you position yourself. What I'd like you to do now is talk about that positioning in terms of the impacts that this might actually mean. Any shift, any change has an impact in terms of what that means for the future. So have a discussion again in your groups about what the potential impact may be in terms of your positioning strategically. I'm hoping you are having a very fruitful conversation, thinking about where you are as an organization and where you are now, or you're beginning to think about where you're wanting to go as an organization. And as you can see, there's a number of key areas that we can focus on. So this is the next activity. At this point in time, you should be given a link to a Google Shared Drive. You'll then find this PowerPoint. If you could make your way down to this particular slide, and what I'd like you to do individually again, so this is an individual task, is I'd like you to write down on these little cards, who do you think are the key stakeholders involved in your institution in terms of work integrated learning? What I'd like you to do is you double click on the little card, you can then write on there. Now, please look at what your colleagues are writing. If you notice somebody's written students, don't you go and write students, if you know what I mean, because you're going to have cards that are saying the same things. Notice what everybody else is doing. So it's kind of a collaborative project, although you're doing it individually. Try and see whether you can cover as many of the stakeholders as possible that you think are involved in your institution's provision of work integrated learning. Try not to repeat and write them on these cards. If you need more cards, just right click, copy, paste, and you'll be able to then have another card that will be created, and you can kind of overlap them. You will be using these a little bit later, and I'll talk you through that when we get there. So if you want to, again, make sure that everybody has the link. I'm not sure whether you're going to email that or whether you've got an online platform where you're going to share the link. Once everybody is in the link, if you can start writing on the cards, who are all the stakeholders involved in your institution? If you want to start doing that right now. Great. You should have an extensive list of stakeholders that you've thought about, that you have written down. Let me just explain the theory that goes behind stakeholder management. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to identify everybody who's involved in a product or service that we're offering, in this case, work integrated learning. Now, there's two key elements here that the grid designs itself on. The first one is the vertical one, which is all about power. So these people drive things. Now, this may not necessarily mean a person who's in a position of power, like the chancellor or a CEO of a company or a program director. This might be somebody who's just got a tremendous amount of influence, and therefore, as a result of that power, might be somebody on a board of trustees or something like that, who directs and who shapes things. So you want to think about this vertical line in terms of power. Who has a significant amount of influence, high to low. The horizontal line is all about who's interested, who has an interest in this. Sorry, not who's interested, who has an interest in this. In other words, your university would have a huge interest in this because clearly this impacts employability statistics, which is how the universities rank themselves among a number of other outputs. And this is pretty much what your power interest grid then looks like in terms of stakeholder management. You want to be able to identify who the people are who have a high power, but not necessarily a low interest. Okay, so it's important that things happen and they've got a lot of power and influence, but they've got a whole lot of other things on their table, and they're not necessarily focused on work integrated learning. But you have to keep them satisfied. If you don't keep them satisfied, they become a big problem for you. Moving down to the bottom left-hand corner, these are people that don't have a lot of power, that don't have a lot of interest. You just want to monitor whether this position shifts or changes in any particular way. Moving across to the bottom right-hand corner, these people again have low power, but a very high interest. So in many ways, the student who does a placement or an internship is probably in this position, unless they're the head of the student union, for example, or they're a student rep, then maybe the power goes up a little bit. But your general student who's on a degree, they don't necessarily have a lot of power, particularly if it's an unpaid placement, as an example. You just need to keep them informed. It's about information. And then your top right-hand corner. Now, this one's a really, really important one. These people have a high level of power and they have a high level of interest. So your work integrated learning director is probably in this position already. You need to manage this process very closely. Right, so that gives you an idea of what the stakeholder analysis is. Let me give you an example of what this could then look like in terms of a scatter plot, and we're going to be doing this in a minute. So this is an example of a youth program. The categorizations is local leaders, landowners, elders, and the youth. And you can see how they are being positioned in terms of influence, but then in terms of position, which is power. So they've shifted the diagram slightly different. And they've positioned the people in terms of where they are situated, right? In terms of high, low, position, and power. So what I'd like you to do is go back to that slide on the Google Drive where you have written down an exhaustive list of who all the stakeholders are. What I'd like you to do now is copy and then paste where you think they are. So if you've written, I don't know, students in general, where in your institution would you put the student card here in the blocks? Again, you've got low to high, vertical and horizontal, exactly as we saw the stakeholder analysis grid. And what I'd like you to do as a group now is discuss where these stakeholders position themselves. Once you've done that and you have finished and you're happy that you've placed those in those positions, go back to this slide and discuss your strategies in terms of how are you keeping that particular group, now that you've identified the stakeholders, how are you keeping them satisfied? How are you managing them closely? How are you monitoring? How are you keeping informed? Which means you can actually begin to evaluate the very specific strategies being implemented in terms of your stakeholders. What I'd also like you to do, please take note of this, is there a stakeholder who is not on this grid, who should be, but they are most likely being overlooked because they have no voice? I think this is an important element that we need to take into consideration in terms of strategy. Representing the person who cannot be represented and making sure that we're not overlooking that. Great. Have lots of fun. Agree as a group where you're going to be putting all your stakeholders. Take a step back and evaluate. Go back to that slide and evaluate how you are actually then communicating and managing those various groups. Have fun. Enjoy. Pause the video at this point. Right, I hope this workshop has been extremely helpful in getting you just to think through what it is that you are doing when it comes to work integrated learning. I'm not trying to provide you with solutions. I'm not telling you what it looks like in terms of scaling up and what it looks like in terms of managing your growth. I'm just helping you to create the material, the goods, for you to be able to do that yourself. So having defined where you are, point A, and you've shared these lists and you've discussed these things, having thought about your own strategies, how you would like to position yourself, who are the stakeholders and how that dictates what you should be doing as a department or as a faculty, I'd like you now to ask these questions again, but about your future. What is your future offer in terms of work integrated learning? Where are you going? What do you want it to be? Now, I'm hoping that your discussion around positioning yourself in terms of a strategy has helped you to actually therefore then say, actually, we're not positioning ourselves. We need to. And as a result of that, that'll have an implication in terms of where do you want to be. Or maybe you are positioning yourself, but you're not doing that effectively, particularly when you think about your stakeholders. Now, if all of this, and you've had your discussion, you go tick, 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 tick. Wow, aren't we just amazing? How are you going to maintain that? How is that going to be sustainable? And again, where you've discussed, what are the key, remember you individually thought, what are the key challenges you may be facing? It might be succession planning, because who is the key person that's keeping this all together? And if they go, this thing will crumble. So maybe, a key process will be, succession planning. I'm going to leave that with you again. Not individually, but now as a group, having done all this discussion and the journey you've just done, what is it that you would like to do that you're not doing at the moment in terms of courses or disciplines? Don't forget cost, focus, differentiation. What is it that you're doing at the moment in terms of industry partnerships, but that you would like to do? And when we're thinking strategy, we're normally thinking 5 years plus. So in 5 years' time, where would you like to be in terms of courses and disciplines? In 5 years' time, where would you like to be in terms of industry partnerships? In 5 years' time, where would you like to be in actual provision? Internships, placements, projects. In 5 years' time, where would you like to be in terms of uptake? 5 years' time, where would you like to be in terms of graduate employment statistics? And in 5 years' time, where would you like to be on any other the other factors that have begun to emerge as you've been having the discussions? So, for example, staffing. I'm going to again ask you to pause the video at this time. Make sure somebody's taking notes. Have a wonderful discussion. Great, welcome back. I hope that has been absolutely fruitful. I hope there's a sense of excitement in the room in terms of where you can go and what you can do, and that it's becoming a little bit clearer in terms of direction for the next 5 years. Now, as you've had that discussion and you may likely be settling on something, I'm going to unsettle all of that again. It's kind of like a golfer hitting a golf ball into the water, and then they take their club to try and scoop it out, and as they do that, they just create all the sediment, and then they can't see their golf ball in the end again. Let me allow me to disrupt your thinking one last time. I've just recently, this is a recording in 2021, I've just recently got this publication, a 2021 publication, the Work-Based Learning Student Handbook, the 3rd edition, by the ex-Ruth Hellier, Tony Wall, who is the lead editor of the Work-Based Learning Journal as well as Applied Management, Anne Minton and Amy Lund. And they've just produced this most recent one, the Work-Based Learning Student Handbook. And one of the key things that I've grabbed out of this is they suggest that one of the key weaknesses in work-based learning is the oversight of small, medium enterprises. I can kind of understand why universities would like big organizations on their books. Walt Disney, IBM, if you're in the UK, the National Health Service. These are big headline catchers. Students recognize these companies. But a lot of where the economy sits nowadays is actually run by your small, medium enterprises. They're the ones that actually feed the economy. And a lot of the positions that a lot of the students most likely will find themselves in are small, medium enterprises. So we want to think very carefully. If we're offering placements and internships in big corporates and multinational companies, but our students are most likely, and you'll know this through your graduation statistics, are going to be ending up in small, medium enterprises, we are mis-selling them an experience which will be helpful. Now, of course, we can learn from all experiences. Work is work, and you can learn from those contexts. But a small, medium enterprise operates very, very different from a multinational in terms of its management styles, leadership, the functions within the organization, and therefore the key skills that are required for somebody to shine within those kinds of contexts. I'd like you to think about that. What are the small, medium enterprises that may be being overlooked within your context? Remember, I asked you to think about which voices are not being represented as stakeholders. This may be one of the voices. They could really use you as an institution and use your students in doing some valuable projects. And they will be given most likely more bigger, more insightful projects than in a multinational where they are so big and so busy that the student in some ways is being babysat. And I'm not suggesting that's how your partnerships are operating, by no means at all. But they are different. And the small medium enterprise might be the stakeholder that is being overlooked. And they potentially are the one that could be benefiting the most from our work integrated learning programs in terms of what we can work with in terms of partnerships. The other one, which is quite a key one, and this came out in this publication also in 2021. If you've done the work integrated learning course, which this workshop is a part of, I was talking about this book. There we go. It's out. It's published. And in this, one of the contributors, one of the chapter contributors, is a guy based in the west of Canada. And his name is Elon Einstein. And he's done a chapter here, chapter 6 in the book, Entrepreneurial Work Integrated Learning. Now, I'm going to pick up on this a little bit later, but it's a key aspect in today's modern industry and today's modern students. There is a huge drive towards startups and entrepreneurial business. Often our placements internships work because a company is already established, it's stable, and our students go and do work experience within those companies. But entrepreneurial work integrated learning is working most likely with one individual who is beginning to set something up. Now, if the student has entrepreneurial ambitions, this is the best placement or internship that you could offer them. They are seeing on the forefront what goes on in terms of entrepreneurship. Also, this enables us to structure and influence the students in terms of social entrepreneurship, to not just start up companies to make money, but to start up companies which contribute sustainably to what it is they're seeking to do within the business environment or anything else that they're doing work integrated learning in. This is being recorded towards the end of 2021, and of course we have lived through one of the most global crises since, I guess, the Second World War, which is the COVID-19 global pandemic. It forced every single institution online. Universities had to quickly adjust, and that includes work integrated learning. And so virtual placements, by default, have been put center stage. Most of the students that I was engaged with during COVID-19 obviously were on virtual placements, working from home, and we've learned some real key lessons about how to make this rich for them, and that this could be another alternative offer in terms of work integrated learning provision. My suspicion, as the virus continues to stick around and things may get worse in the future again, that continually to use technology such as virtual placements is not going to fade away, but is probably going to be around permanently. And we want to think about how, again, cost focus, differentiation. To what degree do you want to offer virtual placements, and how big is this going to be in terms of your offering? Maybe this is your differentiation, that you're only focusing on this. The benefits of virtual placements is that you can have a placement anywhere, absolutely anywhere in the world. Because you're doing it virtually. But you need really good technology to make it worthwhile, creating communities of practice virtually. And you need people who understand how to create these using online technologies and online teaching and learning pedagogy. The third area I want you to think about is international placements. As the world continues to become a smaller place and globalization continues to impact us, how we are linked to each other, linked to each other's countries, cultures, languages, and nations. We are in some ways not just creating graduates, but we are creating international citizens. The labor force is not just about supplying labor to our own countries, but it's about giving people opportunities to consider whether they want to be part of a labor provision in another country. I'm based in the UK, and as a result of Brexit, they've moved their immigration policies to something similar to Australia, where they are identifying the skills they need that is not available locally, which can be brought in from other international contexts. some of your students may have ambitions to be international students in the sense of, or international labor, where what they're trading is their skills internationally. I know many of my friends, when I was growing up in South Africa, from school and from just friendship groups, quite a few of them are in Dubai, quite a few of them are in America, quite a few of them are in Australia, and quite a few of them are in England, like myself. To what degree are you trying to make this a provision in your work integrated learning, to making international citizens? Finally, penultimately, again, please, if you can, try and get your hands on this publication. We focused, and these are case studies from around the world, India, Europe, Australia, Canada, America, applications of work integrated learning among generations Z, Y, and Z. And one of the things that is quite key that is coming out of the research is that these generations are a lot more aware of sustainability, environmental issues. They are a lot more collaborative in their learning. They want to co-create, and they are digital natives. They can do this digitally, no problem at all. But what they do want is that sense of community. So if we can bring all of those things together, we can create things virtually or using technology in a way that's never been used before. But a key element of this generation is they are entrepreneurial. Think about the amount of YouTubers that are entrepreneurial, digital nomads. Many of them are generation Y and Z. And this again links back to the SMEs and entrepreneurial work integrated learning. Now, if you want to go in terms of cost and you just want to have a wide provision, then this may be just one of the elements which you are going to try and provide for. If you're differentiating, you may want to differentiate in the way in which you're engaging with Gen Y and Z in terms of your provision, or in terms of cost focus or cost or differentiated focus. Again, you may want to make Gen Y or Z one of those focuses. I'm throwing it out there for you to think about. And then finally, thinking about Web 5.0 technologies. Do Google it. Go and have a read about this. Some people talk about Web 3.0, Web 4.0, Web 5.0. What it basically entails is artificial intelligence and co-creating with artificial intelligence for the future. So not just where computers provide context for us, such as virtual reality, but where they're engaged with us in that environment, co-creating with us. And we're already beginning to see this. What you look on the internet, picked up by your IP address, you will see adverts on your Facebook, you'll see adverts on your Instagram, you'll see adverts when you're typing into Google search bar. It's already beginning to work with you in terms of how it processes data that you are inputting from your searches and so on, to try and work with you in terms of that. Netflix works the same way. If you open up these channels, it says things we think you will enjoy. Now, how do they know what I'm going to enjoy? Because it's working with me in co-creating. So Web 5 technologies may begin to create opportunities in the future where our work integrated learning opportunities isn't something which is disconnected from the student, but actually begins to emerge from day one in terms of their interests and searches, which then provides them with the ultimate opportunity, which is completely tailor-made towards them, but we are filtering this data all the way through in terms of what we are thinking about providing. Web 5.0 technologies. Do I think work integrated learning technologically wise is there yet? No. I haven't seen any programs where there is this co-creating with data mining and artificial intelligence using the data our students are inputting on a regular basis in order to be able to then create more tailor-made work integrated learning experiences. But it's something that again might become a focus or a differentiation for the future. So I throw those out. I'm going to leave you to finish off your workshop by discussing these elements. Again, is this anything that impacts you in terms of your stakeholders? Is this anything that impacts you in terms of your cost focus and differentiation? Please do then summarize your thinking and work those through in terms of some actions and responsibilities for your strategy. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have thoroughly enjoyed this workshop. And of course, you can run this workshop as many times as you want to. The downloads are free. and you may want to go through this process in maybe 2 or 3 years' time to see how you've journeyed along the way. If you would like me to be involved in any particular way, do get in contact with me. And again, through technology, who knows, there's all kinds of ways in which I could facilitate this on your behalf. But thank you for participating in this workshop.